All right, I entitled the name of this part "Investing Abroad If You're an American," and it's mostly for people that are living outside the United States and they're Americans, and they just don't live here in the US. This video is not necessarily intended for somebody that's living here in the United States and then they are planning to invest or buying an asset, in a foreign country. It's more or less somebody that's living abroad, they're American, and basically they have to comply, with their taxes. So I have several clients in that boat where they are actually American, but they're living abroad. So that's one of the reason why I'm shooting this video is for those people who are actually living abroad and their primary home is actually abroad. Now, here's the thing. One of the ways to even start this process is by determining, where is your primary home? Where do you get your income? And if you are abroad, basically there's what they call the physical present test. We need to actually, when you're filling out your return, you need to put in, how much time that you spent in that country and how much time you actually or in the United States, and that's gonna definitely affect your taxes. Now, there's one thing that they have is the exemption. If you spend all of your time out of the United States and then you're here in the US for less than 30 days, you get what they call this exemption. And I believe it's up to 95,000 where you don't have to pay any taxes. So keep that into consideration even before starting the process. Where is your primary home? Where is your main place of work? Is it outside of the United States? Are you going back and forth, so on and so forth? So you have to figure out more or less the timing that you spent, in each country, or whether it's in the US or outside the US. So that physical present test, it's one way to actually determine that. So there's another way as well. But I think what really matters is basically the time that you spend, in that country. And when you're doing your taxes, you actually have to list them, the timing where you were throughout the year. So that's one of the things to mention. Now, keep in mind, something that's kind of important is there isn't like a big difference in terms of law if you're an American living abroad and then, if you're here in the US. Although there are some differences, but it's not like there's a huge difference. For instance, you guys have a different filing date. No, the filing date still stay the same. You have until April 15 more or less to file. So there is a lot of in common rules, more or less. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Now, there are several things that I have to mention in this video that kind of really matter. Like I said, if you're an American that lives abroad, the first one is you have to file your return. Definitely you have to file your return, whether you're earning, 20,000, 30,000, you have to file your return. That's part of being in compliance. That's one. And then you have to report the income that you gain overseas. Now, like I said, sometimes you can even fall into that category where there's double taxation, but you do have to report the income that basically that you're earning overseas. And I think back in 2011 or 2012, the IRS really went after the people that are living abroad because they're American and they're not reporting, their income, on their return. So they really went after them. Several penalties were charged because of that. So you have to make sure that you report all of your income. Now, keep in mind another thing, if you have an asset, basically that's $50,000 or more, you have to keep that into consideration as well in your taxes. So, people they're American that have like houses abroad, so on and so forth. So, if you have an asset that's more than 50K, you have to keep that into consideration. A couple of years ago, also, they put out this rule that if you have more than $10,000 in a foreign bank account, you have to report that on your taxes. That's right. I think it's like 4 or 5 years back where they implemented that rule, but keep that in mind. Also, if you own a business where you have more than 10% of that business as ownership, you need to report that into your income as well. So in other words is even though you're abroad, but you're still an American. So you still have to comply, with the rules as being an American. And you just have to sit down with your account and then consult in order for you to actually to minimize, those taxes. Now, one of the things that I wanted to mention also is the following. Even though I already touched on it, but it's kind of important because you can be like, hey, in the country where I am, I'm already paying taxes, right? Why should I go ahead and then pay taxes also in the U.S.? And then I would tell you, you have to sit down with an accountant to know more or less how to avoid that. Because there's that effect where you pay taxes on your income in the country that you're living. And then when you report those taxes in the US, you have to pay taxes on it again. So you definitely have to sit down with an accountant. Again, I can reemphasize how much important it is for you to actually to minimize those taxes and to find exactly the right strategy in order for you to actually not pay a lot of taxes. Again, I'll give you an example. I just mentioned that previously, but you do get that $95,000 exemption, but you have to be outside the US, all of the time. You cannot be in the United States for more than 30 days. So that's just one example. So you really have to sit down with your accountant and then more or less, strategize, and then what is the best course of action for you. So that being said is, I think that's all I have to say about this video because this can get a little bit more complicated and more technical. But I mentioned the things that are important, like for instance, the foreign bank account. If you have an asset more than 50,000, you have to report that. If you have ownership in the business, you have to, if it's more than 10%, you have to report that income. So all of those things, they do take consideration into your taxes. And then just make sure you sit down with your accountant and then you just find out the best strategy.